Hello, and a very warm welcome to Passions. And today, my guest is a guy we've just worked it out. I've probably known over 20 years actually, and that guy is a great fella called Phil Garlington. So, a very warm welcome to Passions, Phil.
Thank you.
So, tell us a little bit about yourself and what your passion is.
Well, I am I'm a professional photographer, and I've been a photographer for a very long time. Since I left school, I went to university, worked as a photographer's assistant before that. So if I try and work it out in years, it's well over 40 years that I've been involved in taking photographs, and it's the only thing I've ever done. So that is my passion, continues to be so. Obviously, being a professional photographer, it means that it is my work, my career. But because it is also a passion, means that whenever I get some downtime and I'm allowed to go out, then I still do it for my own enjoyment. So so photography is the passion.
Brilliant. Okay, well, I'm going to go slightly off piste now because I think it's worth just having a chat about something that you made me aware of just before we came on air. And having known you for as long as I have, I found quite a bit of a shock, if I'm honest. So something happened, didn't it, which threw your life into a bit of disarray. So just tell me about what happened.
Yeah, I was rapidly approaching my 60th birthday, and feeling like I was coming round the bend and heading towards the line like a 40-year-old. Very pleased with the way I'd looked after myself, going to the gym, what I eat, and all the rest of it. And then I had a heart attack, which was sort of really stopped me in my tracks, which is a number of months ago now. Excuse me. A few months before the pandemic hit and the lockdown started. So the past over a year or so has been a little disconcerting, I think is probably a good way of putting it, to use very British understatement. But no, it wasn't expected. I didn't tick any of the boxes. I wasn't diabetic or overweight, or I don't smoke, no family history. And so, apart from the heart attack itself and the fact that it was a fairly major one, the biggest problem I think afterwards was slightly psychological, in that because I didn't know what had caused it, I didn't know how to prevent it happening again. And I guess to a point that is still looming. But they do say that because they put a stent in, and my heart's probably in better condition than it has been for years, but you still have to wonder why it got to that point in the first place. But again, you can't live your life thinking about that. And it's allowed me to, once the dust settled, to rethink how I go about things. And it's very difficult not to talk in cliches when you start talking about, journeys and all the rest of it, and epiphanies and all that stuff. But no, at least it's given me a chance to look at it and figure out, as far as I'm concerned, I could be around. My dad sadly passed away 3 or 4 months ago at the age of 93, and I thoroughly expect to outlive him. So that's my aim, and I'll keep myself fit like I always did, and if I do get another one, then at least I'll survive it again. So that's the best way to look at it.
Well, thanks for sharing that, and thanks for being so candid about it, because I know it's a very personal thing. But I wanted to, and I did ask you beforehand if it was okay to ask you about it, in case people thought I'd just suddenly jumped on you with that. But what was, apart from the fact I consider you a friend, what was shocking about that was the fact that there was no signs of it, nothing in the family. You kept yourself fit, you kept yourself pretty slim.
I was in the gym.
Been the biggest shock.
Yeah. And everybody I spoke to said, well, obviously after the event, I thought, well, why me? And I didn't mean why me, it should have been somebody else. I meant why me, because it wasn't expected. And pretty much everybody I know said, out of all the people we know, you were not anywhere near on the list. And it was a fairly major one. It was a widowmaker with a 6% survival. So I think the fact that I kept myself in good shape and looked after myself is the only reason why I survived. I should really just drop down dead. and I was in bed at the time. So the thought that my wife could have woken up and found me there would have been a horrendous prospect. But no, it's and again, people say it must change. People have these things in life that completely change their lives. Well, it's not changed my life. It was just a massive speed bump, and you just got to carry on. And as I say, nothing major philosophical coming out of this. It's just it just wasn't expected, and something you've got to deal with.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And obviously, I don't want to labour on it, but I thought it was important to talk about it, mainly around the fact that, interesting, we're doing this interview actually Christmas Eve, as it happens, in 2020. And so we're coming into that new year where people start to reflect and think about, health and well-being is one of those key things that people think about. And I thought it was useful, as I said to you, that I see this channel as being about ideas, inspiration, and insight. And I think this bit is the inspiration element, in terms of seeing somebody like yourself who's really, really, who was very healthy and had no really underlying conditions. It's made me think personally about, because I know I'm overweight, as I mentioned to you before we came on air. I know I'm overweight. So I think the message is, it can happen to anybody, Phil. That's what jumps out at me. So why would you take the risk add the risk by being particularly overweight? Just maybe start getting better on the diet. So ironically, and I never saw this coming, but this story for me personally has been helpful in me considering my health and well-being going into the new year. So thanks for that. And hopefully, who knows, somebody watching this might take that on board and it might save their life. We might never know, but it just might. So anyway, I don't want to labour on it anymore. And thanks for being so open about it, because I know it's a very, very personal thing.
Oh, it's fine. I'm quite, as I say, it's just like, I don't know, you could have touched on far more personal things. It's just something that, and I would like to say to anybody that's thinking about joining the gym in the new year, or getting fit or losing weight, then, don't get to the 1st of February and give it up, because I'm lucky in a way, because my son is a personal trainer and a dietitian, and so he keeps an eye on me and what have you. So at least I've got that. And probably the reason why I was going to, and have been to the gym religiously since I got married, was because my son, needed to go to the gym as well for his rugby and stuff. And it's taken him into a great career. And he just, as I say, he just keeps an eye on me. So it's which is great. So
well,
get out there and look after yourselves, guys.
Yeah, I'm really pleased to hear that. Okay, so let's talk then about your passion, which is, as you identified, is photography. How did it come about, Phil? Did were you there with I guess what it was, a Kodak and Stamatic in your hand when you were 5?
I'm glad you didn't say Box Brownie.
Yeah, Box Brownie. I was trying to be polite, Phil. Where did it come from? Where did it start?
As a kid, I had 2 older brothers who were pretty academic. They both became teachers. I came along, and I was like not the black sheep, but I was certainly the odd one out. And I always used to do a lot of drawing. When everybody else was watching TV or doing the homework, I would be drawing cartoons or anything around me. I always loved it. I went to this could be a very long story, Phil. Are you up for this?
Yeah, go on. Listen, it's only Christmas. Don't worry about it.
Yeah. Nothing else to do. So I went. So I loved art, and it was my favorite subject. And I went to high school, and after my first year in high school, I remember Mum and Dad coming back from a parents' night, which was always very daunting, because could do better would have been a good report for me. And they said to me, "You're not doing art anymore. You're going to do French." And I said, "I don't want to do French. I love art." And they said, "Yeah, but we've been told that French would look better on your final certificates at the end of it all." So I didn't really take that very well. So for the next 4 years, I did French. To the point, I can't believe I'm admitting to this now, but I remember sitting down for my French GCE, or GCSE as it is now, and the invigilator saying, "Yeah, turn over your papers. You've got 3 hours and start now." And I wrote my name at the top of the paper, and then turned it back over, sat back and fell asleep because I refused to do my French because I wasn't doing art. So bit of a rebel, I think, at that point. And then in the sixth form, I did O-level art in the first year, and I did A-level art in the second year. Got A's in both. But again, I've missed 4 years of very formative time that I really would have loved. I went to university to do technical illustration. On a Wednesday afternoon, part of the course was to do a bit of photography, and they had a studio and a photography lecturer there. And I found myself going back there at lunchtime and on days when I shouldn't have been there. And the guy said to me, listen, I was at Blackpool at the time, Blackpool College, and they said that you realise that Blackpool College has the best photography course in the country. Why don't you just skip to the other course? Because I was only a month or 6 weeks into this technical illustration. So I wandered across to the photography department and said, can I skip over? And they said, no, you've missed too much. You're going to have to come back next year and apply like everybody else does. So I went home and told my mum and dad that I was packing in my course, which you can imagine didn't go down too well. And said, well, what are you going to do? And I said, well, I'll find a job as a photographer's assistant or something, and I'll learn how to be a photographer. And so yeah, that's going to happen. And I picked up the Lancashire Evening Post maybe a night, 2 nights later, and there was an advert for a photographer's assistant. And I applied for it, and I got it, and it was 22 quid a week. And I made tea and I loaded film, and but because they knew that I wanted to go back to Blackpool College and study it, the photographers that I worked for taught me what I was doing. I was building sets and all kinds of stuff. It was an amazing time. My first assistant's job was photographing Miss Great Britain in the bath. So I definitely thought at that stage that this is a job for me. This is wonderful. I'm getting paid 22 quid for this, you know. So So yeah, I did that for a year. Then I went back to Blackpool College and did 3 years there. Graduated, was unemployed for a year. Went to America and worked there for 2 years. Came back, set up in business as a commercial photographer. Got married. I'm shortening it here, by the way. Got married, and when kids came along and money was tight, I thought, well, I better start doing weddings and portraits. I think the fifth portrait I did won Northwest Portrait of the Year, and the third wedding I did won Northwest Wedding Photographer of the Year or something. So yeah, that's pretty much. And so now, having had the education in commercial and advertising work that I'd had through being an assistant and through college, and then doing the social side with the portraits and the weddings, I'm pretty much a jack of all trades, and you can finish that however you wish.
Brilliant. So what is it about photography that do you think that creates that passion in you? Because I ask this to everybody really, because this is part of my journey of investigation, I suppose. Where does it come from? Why are you not doing I don't know, why are you not a technical drawer or an architect? Well, one thing I
found out about technical drawing was that to do exploded view of oranges, which we used to do, could take about 3 weeks. I can take a creative photograph in a fraction of a second, and I quite like the laziness of it. Oh, I've gone. Can you see me, Phil?
Yeah, I can still see you.
Sorry about that. I disappeared, which no bad thing.
That's all right.
And so I really don't. I'll tell you when I find myself now when I go out and do stuff for myself. I do a lot of street photography. Luckily I've spent quite a lot of time in America, and even in the past 10 years I spent a lot of time in New York, and I just photograph people, and street photography is the genre. When I started doing that, I remember I was in there with a pal of mine and his wife, and we were walking to a restaurant for lunch, and I had my camera with me because obviously you're going into New York, you have a camera with you. And I said, and they were talking, and I said, I'm sorry, I just have to stop. And I turned around and I walked back and I photographed something. And that was my first attempt at street photography, because something caught my eye. And I thought, well, this is it. This is, you're capturing something instantaneously that will never, ever happen again. We all go to Lake Windermere and stand there and think this is absolutely stunning. and you take a picture, and unless it's blurred or out of focus, or you've got your exposure wrong, everybody's going to get exactly the same picture. Whereas if you're doing something like street photography, it's a case of being initially inspired, and then your brain reacting to it, and then creating it with the equipment that you've got. And it's a very quick process, and I think it's that spontaneity about it that I think I like. So yeah, I mean that's that, and it is that as soon as you have created something, and crikey, I could go on all day here. I think one of the things about,
do you know what? Do you know what's interesting though is that is how you can tell people are passionate about it, because that's exactly it. That's ironically that, you know, that's what it's about. It's about that feeling of excitement, like childlike excitement.
It is.
You know, we're adults, but we always have that for our passions. We have that childlike excitement.
And I think you have to. I think you have to have that sort of release or something. And you know, but it's constantly on. And I do a lot of lectures for people or talks for societies and stuff. And one thing I always say is, you are not a photographer just when you've got a camera in front of your face. You should be seeing things all the time. You should be constantly, you know, I find myself squinting my eyes and looking at the way the light is coming through a window and hitting something. And, you know, my kids say, "You having a stroke?" And I say, "No, I'm just looking at the light, and look at that tree." You know, it's like, "Dad, you're weird." But that is, and photography is obviously all about lights, and I'm constantly looking at things like that. You know, I'll be driving along and I've driven past the same tree or the same whatever it is many times, and thinking I'll photograph that when I drive past it and the light is right. And then I go back and the light is right, and I go, "Oh, great!" And I jump out the car and I take a picture of it. You know, I mean, it's constantly working. So how was I mean, and I have to ask you is, I mean, I guess none of us could have ever believed that, and I'm going to put this in inverted commas, the quality of a smartphone camera. Yeah. I think if you and I, when we first met, said, you know, you'll get this little gadget that you can talk to people all over the world on, you know, and by the way, it's going to have a camera, probably a camera as good as a mainstream camera would have been at that time. Has that even surprised you, how the technology's developed as quickly as it has? I think it has, and what surprises more than anything else is we still call them phones, and most people don't actually use them as a phone. I rarely ring anybody on my phone. I text them, I go on the internet, I take pictures. Yeah. I would never use a phone for a professional job. It could be done because a lot of images these days are only used on the net, so they don't have to be massive quality. So the idea in the old days was the better the camera, the bigger you could blow your picture up, because that was a big deal. These days, very few people print them off anyway. So I think it has its limitations. But just cameras in general. And again, the one thing I always say to anybody who says, you know, I want you to teach me how to take better pictures. I want to be able to learn how the camera works and how to shoot in manual. And why? Why? I mean, there is a reason why these things have been developed to this high spec. Is so that it allows you to do nothing but see something and take the picture. I mean, that's what it's all about. And it's here that you take your picture with, not the camera. Now, if you do put your camera on program or automatic, occasionally the camera has slight inadequacies where it won't do what you want it to do. But for the amount of pictures that you lose because of inadequacies in your equipment, for want of a better term, you'll get far more pictures from not having to worry about what it's doing. You know, it's just get on with it. You know.
Yeah, I understand that, because obviously I do a fair bit of video these days, and more on the corporate commercial side, right? I don't do weddings and stuff like that. But I've had a couple of times where, you know, I had it on auto, and I thought I'd had it on manual, and I was doing, you know, get that right, and get the aperture right, and ISO, all that jiggery pokery that she'll understand. And then a couple of times I had it on auto and forgot I'd got it on auto. And I watched it back. I thought, my God, that's better, or certainly as good as if I've been fiddling around with all the different elements to it. Do you enjoy?
Sorry?
I was going to say, do you actually enjoy more taking the pictures, or do you enjoy more the creative process when you get it on the computer and you color grading? And that's assuming you do all that kind of thing, which I assume you do.
Yes. Sorry, the dog's trying to get in the door. First of all, I'm going to say I'm not technically minded. That would be wrong, because I see anything technical as a learning process to be endured until you get to know how to use it. And once you use it, you shouldn't really think about it. So yeah, it's the creative side always. It's always about, like I was saying before, it's always about what I'm thinking about, ideas I have in my head. I've started to enjoy Photoshop more than I used to. I used to use it for the kind of things that I used to use in the darkroom, so dodging and burning, contrast, changing your color temperature, stuff like that. So the very, very basics. Everything else had to be done in camera to me. But it's only in recent, probably 2 or 3 years that I've thought, well, I've got to see this as another instrument of creativity rather than a way of cheating, because I think other people do that. And I would, if you look at a picture and you think that's completely overworked, then it's not achieved what it set out to achieve. Unless you're doing composites and pieces of art, some of the stuff you can do on there now. But if you're just taking a picture and trying to work the hell out of it to make it look better than it was because it was rubbish in the first place, then that's not what I was after. So yeah, I've started to get into the creative side. The one thing I've had during my lockdown, which has been a number of months longer than most, is that I've been doing a lot of research. One thing, I've never really been a follower of photographers. I meet other photographers, obviously, occasionally along the way, and they'll say, "Oh, have you seen the work by such and such a person?" I've never even heard of them, and I was quite embarrassed by that for quite a long time. And then I realised what I tend to do is if I watch things like Sky Arts, and every now and then you'll have a photographer, a New York street photographer or whatever, and I'll watch it, and I'll guarantee half an hour later I couldn't tell you what his name was, but I could tell you what his pictures were and what he photographed, and that was the inspiration to me. But I get my inspiration from more than just that. It could be art, it could be watching music videos. Things like, these days watching TV programs like Games of Thrones. I'll say to my kids, "Can you rewind it?" Because I was watching it, but I was looking at the lighting, and I don't know what they said.
I was going to ask you that, actually. Funnily enough, I did have that in my mind to ask you about whether you kind of drive everybody nuts with looking at everything through your creative lens. If you pardon the pun. And stop it. Oh, hang on a minute. Just stop that a minute. Love it. Love it.
It does allow me a bit of artistic license, though, because I can be in a pub and a girl can walk in and I can say, "Wow, she's gorgeous." And my wife now knows that I'm only doing that from an aesthetic point of view.
Yeah, it's a completely professional perspective.
Yes.
Yeah.
Very photogenic is what I really do.
Yeah, exactly. So do you tend to get your learning and inspiration from YouTube these days, or the internet these days, or do you still read books? Do you remember those books?
Yes, books. Photo books, really, to me, it's the best way to have your photography viewed is in a book. And there are a lot of photographs that you take which you wouldn't put on a wall, but in the context of a book and a collection works. So I think, but I tend to go on YouTube to learn how to do Photoshop techniques that I don't know, to allow me to get my creativity to where I want it to be. I don't go on and think, I don't go on and watch other people's work on YouTube. I think it's always been a debate, and it's a question I get asked a lot: is it okay for me to watch other photographers and try and emulate their work? Well, I think to a degree, you could say, well, if you took a picture and you said, right, Phil, you go away and do your version, then the fact that I'm doing my version means it will be slightly different. But personally, I wouldn't feel happy with that because I didn't come up with the original idea. Having said that, I am not against being inspired by somebody. If you see a photograph of somebody takes a photograph of 3 onions or something, and they do it really, really creatively, then don't go away and photograph 3 onions. Get 3 heads of garlic or something and do something slightly different, and use the approach. But and I spoke to somebody recently who had all the gear. He's got more gear than me, everything, and he said, Phil, I'm going to show you some of my pictures, and he was really proud as punch with them. And I thought, I don't know what I'm going to say because they were just banal. It's probably the best term. And at the end of it, he said, what do you think? And I said, well, you know what's missing from your pictures? And he said, what? And I said, you.
Yeah.
He actually cried. And I said, you've got all the books, you've got all the tutorials, you've downloaded all the stuff, and you just think, I like that picture and I'm going to do that. And, that's really not the way to go about it. I think what you've got to do, and what people are scared of when you're being creative, is you're scared of getting it wrong and being ridiculed. And I've got it wrong many times, and I've been ridiculed many times. But my passion is enough for me to just do it anyway. And I think that's what you've got to get over. That's what you've got to do.
Do you know, I try and get takeaways from every interview that I do. And as you know, I've been doing many, many interviews over the years. And, I think that is one takeaway from this that I've just got when you said that. And that's that whole idea of if you're passionate about it, for crying out loud, do it.
Yeah.
Because we've got so much fear, haven't we, flowing through our veins. And what you said there is actually known as social phobia, which is the fear of being judged.
Yeah.
And it's as big today as it's ever been.
Oh, yeah. Probably worse because of social media. But I always think, if you think about a child, and you're in the same position as me. I mean, I've probably got pictures in this room that my kids are now 30, 27, and 25 or something. But when they used to draw you a picture and they bring it and say, Daddy, look at this. I've drawn a picture of you. And your eye would be up here and you'd have a leg missing. And, but they were so proud of it because they had made it. And I think everybody should have that attitude to anything creative that they do. It doesn't matter how bad it is. Just be proud of it, because you'll get to the next stage from doing it. But you're never going to get to the next stage from sitting there watching YouTube videos about how good other people did because they didn't do that.
That's absolutely right. And just a question, I wonder what your perspective on this is. At school, and it's inevitable that it's like this to a point, but at school, it seems to be, unless arguably you're able to you're lucky enough to be able to go to private school, maybe. But it's almost like I always see it as sheep dip schooling.
Yeah.
And do you think that or have you got any views as to whether there's enough opportunity for kids to allow their creativity to flow?
More so, I've got to watch what I'm saying here because I'd say I've got 2 brothers who are teachers. I think more so than, yes, when I was at school, it was, it was painting by numbers. Unfortunately, it wasn't painting. They just write stuff on the board and then you wrote it in your book. And well, some of it was, not all of it. There were some very good teachers. So the thing that one of the things I noticed as my kids were getting older was this business that on the sports side where everybody got a trophy and there was no winner. Nobody was appointed as a winner, and everybody's a winner. And my children were particularly good at sport, and it used to really annoy me because they, especially my son, he'd come home and say, "Yeah, but I won, but everybody got a trophy," and you feel like saying, well, when you do a maths exam, there's a person that comes first and everybody else comes first. Why is it one rule for academia and different for sport? And within all that, I think that's reversing now because people have to be seen for the talents they've got. There are people out there who can't do physics and maths and English and geography, but are outstanding at sports, and therefore That's where they should be channeled. And likewise, and I don't think it is being done, is for creativity, and that could be dancing. It doesn't have to be art. It could be writing, because there is creativity in writing. Obviously, we do English literature, but how much creativity is actually encouraged in that? So no, I think creativity is seen to be a quirk, or something that should be followed as a hobby, rather than. And it's crazy, because that's, if you think about it, all these people who are good at all the professional and academic stuff turn to the creative side of life for entertainment. So it's massively important. And I agree. I don't think it's given enough exposure, and I don't think it's encouraged enough.
But well, certainly that's a rabbit hole we could easily go down. So I'll try and stop. I will stop myself going down it. But yeah, I do absolutely agree with you. And one of the things, just seeing as you mentioned it, that I'm frustrated about the idea, as you say, of 8th place trophies, as I actually call it, is it doesn't reflect real life, Phil.
No, it doesn't. No, it doesn't.
Because in life, you don't get, you either get that job or you don't get that job. You get that starring role in that West End show, or you don't.
Exactly.
So I don't think it's preparing kids for the reality of the harsh world that they're going to go into.
Yeah. No, I agree, and I think a lot of reality TV these days, as much as I dislike it, I think in a lot of ways it points out that there's a lot more talent out there that we ever knew about, that would never have been highlighted in any other way. I don't like the way it's being highlighted, but it does prove the point that, so many more people can sing than we ever thought. So yeah, I mean, and again, it shouldn't be just. I remember when I was a kid, and I could actually, before my nethers dropped, I was quite a nice little singer, and I remember my teacher dragging me into the headmistress, and I thought I was in serious trouble, and she said, "Stanley, it's the right, sing." So I sang. They said, "Oh, wow, he's got a great voice." Well, but again, why wasn't that encouraged? They said, "Well, we should be actually. Why don't we pass him on to And it doesn't, because it's just seen like an extra talent that will go along with everything else,
Well, a lot of people say that, and it's a theme that's coming up time and time again in this process I'm going through with the Passions investigations, is that it's this whole theory that if you end up making a living out of your passion, you're not actually working.
Yeah.
Is that something that you can relate to?
No. because
no, to be honest, is it good?
Yeah. Well, if you're being creative, then there's always a conflict going on in your head anyway at any given time. There's always that, well, will this work or will that work, or should I be doing it this way, or did I do it wrong last time, or should I do it this way next time? And also, if it is your job, then you still got a client, and you still got to get paid and pay the mortgage. I just find myself very I don't know, just very lucky that, as I say, I still enjoy the process. I know a lot of photographers who do dog portraits but don't like dogs, and you think, well, what are you doing it for? And I think once you get cynical about what it is you're doing, you should really get out and do something else. And that's in any walk of life. Luckily, I still love it. There are times when I think it's actually hated me, and I feel like I'm in an abusive relationship, but I still love it,
Well, yeah, I mean, on the wedding photography side, which I know you've done a lot of over the years and very well. I don't think anybody, if anybody thinks about the level of stress there must be for any photographer, it's a one-time gig, isn't it? Yeah. If you get the wrong or have the wrong setting on the camera, anything. Oh, yeah. Dare I say it, or the lens cap on. I mean, that's a joke, isn't it? Yeah. But is it fair to say that that the levels of stress are huge when it comes to wedding photography?
It is. I mean, I've done weddings in the past. I remember doing one down at Sandhurst, and it was 94 degrees on the parade ground, and I was wearing a suit because I was dressed to like you should do. And I was drenched, and then I had to drive all the way home. And I remember driving all the way home at some ungodly hour of the morning. back up north, and I felt my whole body was singing, because it was like, because I'd spent the whole day physically getting more and more knackered, and mentally just frazzled. There is a lot of stress on that, and again, the good thing about digital these days is that you can see if you've got it. You know, you can look in the back and you can see you've got it. Whereas I think in those days, I just have a pocket full of film and keep reloading. And luckily, I never had. Most of the photographers that I've spoken to who do that for a living have had one disaster or another, and luckily, I never really did, thankfully. And it was usually a technical issue with the camera, or it was never their abilities as photographers. But but the one thing I found, Phil, which having been through the loading film and not knowing what you've got, and having to work within the constraints of, well, I've got 5 rolls of film here to cover a whole event, and once that last frame is gone, I've no more film left. It taught me to be selective, how to anticipate a picture. And one thing I've found with wedding photographers now, I get people calling me up and they ask the usual questions, obviously, what do we get and how much does it cost and all the rest of it. And then they'll say, well, how many pictures do we get? And I usually say, well, once I've edited them down and what have you, you'll probably have, I don't know, depending on the wedding, because obviously each wedding's different, probably around 150 to 250, maybe more if it's a big event. And they'll say, well, I just spoke to somebody, we get 2,000 pictures. And you think, I couldn't take 2,000 pictures in a day, because they're just going chink, 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 because they can.
Yeah. You can't be selective. You can be you can't be, well, there's no need to be selective if you've got digital and it's just delete, take again, delete. Yeah.
But the problem is you could still miss it. You could still miss it, I mean, I if I'm doing a wedding and there's a bride there talking to somebody and I can see she's getting animated, and I can see in a second she's going to throw her head back and laugh. Then I wait for that moment. I don't just go clink, 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 and then move away, and then she throws her head back and laughs. You just missed it, It's just...
See, that's really interesting, that, actually, because, again, I don't think anybody would think of that in terms of the professionalism that is almost driven by instinct, isn't it? Yeah. That's what I'm hearing there. It's that instinct that 1 or 2 seconds before, she's probably now going to throw her head back and laugh and being ready for it.
And the other thing is, Phil, is by the time if you wait to see it, then by the time you press your shutter speed, you've missed it. So you've got to be aware that, and you've got to, but again, and a lot of that is a love of people. One of the things that I found when I used to do my commercial work, and one day I'd be photographing shoes, and then it'd be fridges, and then it'd be watches, is that I miss people. And when I could ever get a model in, the interaction was great. So when I started doing weddings and portraits, I realized it was that love of people. And when I do portraits, and I still do a lot of portraits, I go to the home. So inevitably people usually have pictures taken because they've got little kids. So I'm going into their environment to get to sit on their living room floor and have some fun with them while I talk to mum and dad and have a cup of coffee. And I'm meeting these people for the first time in an environment I've never seen before. So I'm going to get creative. I'm going to get inspired. Whereas if I'm in a studio and I put that light on and I put that light on and I pull that backdrop down and next lot of people come in, there's no inspiration or spontaneity, and I've done it, and I'm not decrying people that do it, because it's not easy to do, especially because the worst thing about that is you're getting young kids into a room with a strange bloke they've never seen before.
Yeah,
that's going to sit on Santa's knee. You've got to be very, very good at what you do to get them where you need to be. Whereas if I'm going into their environment, if they're not up for it for half an hour, I'll just have another cup of coffee and wait. It's great. So, but it means that I'm getting shots that even if I came back the following day, I'd never be able to get again, because they would be in a different mood or a different place or whatever, So
I know, I totally. So, as somebody who's very, very inspired by variety in everything he does, especially in my work, there's no doubt about that. I get that, because you're never quite sure, are you? The look, the expression, the communication that they make, whether they use the hands, whether they don't. There's always, you never know what's coming next, in a sense, do you?
No. And what I've started to do now, Phil, in a way, I've started during the lockdown is to set myself projects, and I've started doing things that I've never done before, and that in itself is inspirational. I don't know if you see here behind me this old football and some old football boots, and I'm going to do some kind of a still life with those. I started doing some really still life and trying to make them look like old masters and stuff, and all kinds of weird objects. And again, I've liked that idea of setting myself projects, and I've been doing a lot of woodland photography. I live out in the Ribble Valley, so and I've been going out in a stupid time in the morning, so when the sun rises, and find myself in the middle of the woods, which is quite creepy, really. But but again, just for, and I think therapeutically, for the health reasons I've been through, getting out there and connecting with nature, and without getting too odd, hippie about it. But it's I think it's helped on that as well. So again, just setting myself those goals and pushing barriers and learning stuff that I wouldn't normally have done. So, and I think that is all part of the process. If you find yourself good at something and then you just keep doing it, well, that's neither creative nor you're not growing. You're not growing, are you? You're just staying where you are, and you're self-satisfied. So, no, there's nothing wrong with getting things wrong, but doing things badly. So,
brilliant. Okay, final last two questions then.
Yes.
The first one, I think it's important to ask you the question, because I think people would wonder, is do you now look at life differently, having had the scare you've had, Phil?
I have to say no. As I say, it wasn't like an epiphany, and I haven't had this. Well, I now have to live life to the fullest because tomorrow may never happen. That's Disney stuff. In a lot of ways, it made life harder, especially with the pandemic. I mean, it's just made life. It made my life so much more difficult, and I'm trying to attack it from a far weakened position. So at the moment, I think any kind of philosophical, any kind of philosophical approach I can get out of this will be in hindsight. I did this, and that happened because of this, and that's when my mind changed on that. But certainly, no, I know that I've got to keep myself fit. I look at other people, and I'm happy to do this because I think, if anything, if you do smoke, stop. What the hell are you doing? And I have friends who smoke, and I think, oh my God, I've just had a heart attack, and that I'm in good shape, and yet you're still doing it. So no, I maybe I've got a bit grumpy in my old days, but nothing more.
Listen, mate, we all get grumpy. There's an age where the grumpy switch gets switched on. I said to my wife, actually, am I much different now than I was when you met me? And she said, not really at all, apart from you're more grumpy. So I went, yeah, I've got self-awareness. I know. So
I bet you didn't dare tell her that she's got more grumpy, though, did you?
No.
No. Good boy.
I thought it. Okay, so finally, back on piste.
Yeah.
Do you think you've ever taken the perfect picture? And if not, do you think you ever will?
No and no. I think it's probably. But again, that's so. There are times when I've taken a picture and I thought I'm really chuffed with that. But then you move on, and if you don't move on, then I spoke to photographers, and they still put the same picture on the website that they put on the wedding brochures back in 1962. Well, move on for your own good as much as anybody else's, because the chances are you probably couldn't take that shot again anyway. So no, I don't think I'll ever take the best picture, but I'm going to bloody enjoy trying.
Brilliant. Phil, thanks ever so much for that. Really some fantastic insights there, some great inspiration. Thank you for recovering from your heart attack, because if you hadn't, I wouldn't have got this interview with you. And it's great to see you still in good health. As I said at the start, it was quite a shock when you told me what had been happening. But I'm delighted you're okay. And obviously, stay safe in these weird and all these cliches, unprecedented and... But anyway, by this time next year, hopefully we'll all be stuffed with vaccine and all be looking back on 2020 and the year that was. So thanks for joining me today, Phil. I really appreciate your time.
No problem. Hope to see you soon. Maybe we'll grab a beer.
It would be nice. It's long overdue.
Yeah.
Thanks, Phil.
Cheers,
Take care.
Cheers. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.